I'm not going to tell you the story when I was last in Fort Lauderdale, because you'll laugh at the story of me running through the cornfield because I was going down the road as an 18-year-old sailor with somebody else's girlfriend. I haven't been back to Fort Lauderdale since. So this is a wonderful night for me to be here. I'm sorry you couldn't see that piece, but I did bring some of the tapes you can buy. 1804 is probably the best documentary that anyone has done on the Haitian Revolution. And so, and the Haitian Revolution, you know, sometimes we think of revolution and we think of somebody picking up a gun and shooting at somebody else, and whoever wins, then that's the revolution. But that's not what the Haitian Revolution was about. And so, let me try to see if I can get my timeline back. So I was going to do a lot of reading for you, because we don't understand. When I call Haiti today, Baina Bello told me that she's been locked down in her home since Monday, because Haiti right now is on fire, okay? I mean, things have been hot down there for a while, but the president came out yesterday and he said all the wrong things. And so the people have taken to the street in a more profound way. So right now, Haiti is tipping on the edge of a new revolution. And you know, the people have been fighting for years, and particularly over the last year and the last 6 months in Haiti. And we're kind of missing it because the Western media tells us but Haiti, and it's all lies and it's all wrong. You know, and I go down there frequently, and the Americans even interfered with my going. But I'm smarter than them. I can send 3 of me by other names anytime I want. And right now, those people in Haiti are in the streets of Haiti this moment, raising hell about their liberty. But you just came back. I didn't even see you from Haiti, you know? And so maybe you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on, what that you see. Because Baina told me she got you on the plane and she got you out of there, you know? But they're hunkering down, trying to deal with the situation as it is. But when we think of the Haitian Revolution, and then I want to read you some timeline, because the revolution isn't just about fighting a war against some other people who had enslaved us, and then we won and they lost. There's a whole lot of things involved. America was involved in that revolution, at a moment trying to help us and most times against us. The British was involved. The Spanish was involved. The French was involved, all trying to crush the spirit of the people of Haiti. Most people don't know, when we think of the Haitian Revolution, that that's the only nation in the world that was able to defeat Napoleon Bonaparte's army, the best of his army, until Waterloo. Okay? So you would think, as bad and as dominant and important as Napoleon is to world history, somebody would say a small island in the Caribbean, led by black men and women, defeated the greatest emperor Europe ever produced. But it's never mentioned. It's never mentioned. They will not tell you that Haiti defeated the British army, defeated the Spanish army, and defeated the French army, all within a 10-year period. Those were the 3 mightiest European armies in the world. And a few thousand black men and women who were determined to be free decimated all 3. And America was financing much of the British effort. So that meant they decimated America as well. 4 of the greatest military force in the world was defeated in this process called the Haitian Revolution. Now, it didn't last one day, and it didn't happen with just one army. And things wasn't always smooth, just like it is in our communities now and our struggle now. There's a moment when Christophe and Dessalines and Toussaint are together. Then there's a moment when Christophe and Dessalines would break away from Toussaint. There's a moment where you have Boyer and Pétion, who were the mulatto leaders, fighting against Toussaint and Dessalines. And there's a moment where you have them fighting with them. And then you get the betrayal when Pétion would have the setup and kill Dessalines and really cripple the revolution from then to now. And so, well, don't get caught up on that, because you have just as much mulattoes fighting for freedom as you're fighting against. But Pétion did represent an organization of the mulattoes who at a point before 1800 was petitioning France to just give freedom to the mulattoes and leave the free blacks and the enslaved blacks into slavery. But that didn't work because the French didn't agree. And then there came a time when the French realized we were in trouble, and they said, okay, we will give freedom to the free blacks and to the mulattoes, but we will not free the 90% of the blacks who are enslaved. And that's when you get the irritated genie. That's when you get the spirit of a Toussaint. But that wouldn't be fair to say, because the people who stimulate and start this revolution is really not the men, it was the Haitian women. And we don't hear enough about them. You know? So when you think of a sister like Cecile Fatima, and I wish you could have watched the piece because they were all in there and you could see photos of them. And when Bookman, who is given a lot of credit for what happened on both Cayman in the Alligator Woods in the forest for initiating the revolution, he initiated that phase of the revolution, because the revolution isn't one thing. It isn't just Bookman, it isn't just Toussaint, it isn't just Dessalines. Before them you had Mackandal, who was a herbalist and enslaved African, who was a voodoo priest, who, and I'm going to talk about voodoo because voodoo was the reason for the success of the revolution, not a gun. Right? And it's about the mind. Right? And you see I'm wearing all these heavy necklaces weighting me down. So, but I want to explain them. But to understand the Haitian Revolution, you have to understand the Haitian mind. And you have to remember that the Haitian mind is the African mind. And then you've got to understand what the mind is. The mind is a set of values, interests, and principles that inform and instructs the behavior of a human being. So it depends on whose values, interests, and principles you have been reared in that will determine how you will behave about your own freedom. And this is where voodoo becomes sacred and important. Now the first thing we need to understand, voodoo is not witchcraft, that's a European thing. Okay? If voodoo could be used to just kill anybody, we wouldn't need a gun. We can change our relationship with Europeans today. And I could sell you a pound of voodoo by the hour and be the richest man in the world, and you can go get rid of all your enemies. So the foolishness that you can use voodoo and do somebody and get somebody and take the husband and take the wife or punish them and then lose the foot. If we had all of that, would we not have defeated those people and been done with it? Would we be suffering in Haiti today if that's what voodoo is? You know? So we want to look at these people and look at these incidents and see for that period of time they were successful, why they were successful. And that's why Bookman is so important in that prayer, because he tells us something. He says, give up the gods of your enemy and the white man. Now what is the gods? See, because we all think we know what God is, but most of us don't know a thing about God other than a word. All right? He said, give up the gods of the white man and return to the gods of your ancestors. And he picked one especially that we like to call on, and that's Ogun. And we say Ogun is the god of war, but that's short-sighted mythology. That's not what Ogun is. That is one way of displaying it. We said he's the god of iron, but that's because we don't understand metaphor and folklore. Ogun is the African philosophical system that deals with transformation of the human character. Okay? You use this thing about the iron, because the way you make iron is you take a piece of rock, right, that contains these elements, you put it in the fire, you burn it, and cause transformation into an element we call steel that you can then make into instruments to help you in your civilizing process. So we're talking about transformation of the human character, but when most of the world, our world at that time was what we would call illiterate today, you had to create a literate process that was folklore and allegory. So we had a very literate society, but not in the sense we think of literacy today in terms of writing and reading the way we do today, but it was our folklore, our allegory, our dance, and our music that was the intellectual measurement of what you knew. And so they created these instruments that we call loas, or we call orisha, to teach concepts, ideas, and principles. And this is what is occurring in the Haitian Revolution. The elders who lived in the Maroon community, because there was Maroon community, Haiti had some of the first Maroon communities. People got off the slave ship, escaped, went in those mountains, and lived free, and was never enslaved. And it is these people who is helping to aid and assist those who are enslaved. But you remember, they're up against the mightiest armies in the world of that day. They're up against the most powerful navies in the world of that day. Haiti was producing more capital for Europe than all of the British colonies combined. Do you understand? Do you know how much money that is? You know what power that was giving to the bankers and the insurance and the other people in France? So this is about money. It was about money then, it's about money today. And you've got to understand that. It is about money and it's about power. And the people in Haiti who had gotten skilled in the French culture and the French education, like Toussaint and Boyer and Pétion and others, took that and turned it back on France when they merged that with our philosophical system. Because most of us as Africans don't think we have a philosophical system. We don't think we have a history. I just left Bermuda a few days ago and there were people saying, we don't have a culture. Everyone has a culture. You simply have to recognize what culture is. And culture is everything that you do. Culture is your food, culture is your dance, culture is your dress, culture is your spiritual belief system, culture is the way you raise your children, culture is how you define love, culture is how you determine structure of family. All of those things combined makes up what is your culture. The problem is, if you have the consciousness of your enemy instructing you in how to formulate your consciousness, you can only recreate your enemy's destructive consciousness as your consciousness. And that's what we keep doing over and over.